Welcome to the 91 Untold Change Project. I'm Neil Armand, your host for today. And in the 91 Untold studio today, I have David Smith Collins. Now, the reason we invited David to be part of the Change Project is, well, I guess for the last 8 or so years, he's been a coach, a leadership consultant, change consultant, and I've had the pleasure of working with him over that time. But also before that, he was a senior police officer, retiring as assistant chief. He also now lives in Bahrain, which I think gives another dimension to the project as well, looking outside of the UK and the way that things work. And I think all of those three aspects, the consultancy, the police, and the Middle East, have something to add to our project. So I hope you enjoy the show. Welcome to the 91 Untold Change Project.
The whole universe is in a state of entropy.
If you can unlock that higher motivation, they'll be with you.
How do you create an environment where people can find meaning at work?
That can create the needed culture change.
How does radical change happen?
You know it's a good business.
In terms of our evolution, we were not required to have a conscious understanding of complex systems.
What creates great innovation in the social arena?
It starts with you taking action. Have some real sense of control over our lives.
David, welcome.
Thank you.
Can we start off maybe with the police? I know you were responsible for quite a lot of change projects within the police. So you were seen as an innovator.
Innovator. That's interesting. Rather than troublemaker. Okay.
Well, it's all about perception, I suppose, isn't it? From where I'm standing, it was an innovator.
Yeah.
But I know a lot of people saw the troublemaker side of things. But what did you learn about change within an institution like the police as you were working there?
Wow. Well, that's a big question. I was in the police for 30 years or so. So a lot of change happened whilst I was there. I started in 1979. It was a long time ago. I'm sure many of your listeners weren't even born in that time.
I'd like to pretend I wasn't, if that's okay.
No, I'm sorry. The point is about change is that, I suppose my whole life's been one long change, and for me, it genuinely has been a constant. There's never been a day where there hasn't been something changing. And when I look back, I probably instigated a lot of that change. And the joke about are you an innovator or are you a troublemaker is a very valid thing, because I always thought I was innovative. I always thought I was creative. I like to change things. In the early days, it was like make a change to prove that I was good, and make a change to show that I could have a contribution. Particularly as I got promoted, but change for change's sake happens a lot, and I was probably guilty of that in the early days. But as I matured and as I sort of developed in experience, I realized that change was an essential attribute to any organization. And people didn't like it because the culture in the police, certainly in my early years, was we're not for changing. This is the way we've done it. This is the way we've always done it, and this is the way we will always do it in the future. And if you try and rock the boat, and if you try and instigate some form of change, you're seen as a troublemaker.
And so how did you get around that? Were there any strategies you used? Were there things you did? Because everything I've seen when I've looked at your career is you actually did make quite a big impact. So you must have found ways to get beyond those things.
I think, looking back, I think I was quite an effective change agent. I've got the scars and the grey hair to prove it. But how did I do it? Well, I think the first thing is you have to have an element of frustration. I think you have to have the insight to identify, what's important around here and how things could get better. Everybody wants things to get better.
Yeah.
But nobody wants things to change. And nobody really embraces change. Because they see it as something painful. They see it something, that they've had scars from previous encounters where change hasn't perhaps been handled terribly well. So it's about aligning the sort of going with the grain of human nature, I call it, all the time, and to try and find a mandate for change.
Right.
So what do you think needs to be changed from your own perspective, and where can you get people to support you in that endeavor? And building alliances and build collaborative relationships to try and get the power to enforce the change.
Right.
So and for many years, I felt that I was swimming against a cultural tide that was against me. And sometimes, you go with the tide and you just say, I just need a rest now. Let's just go with it. Let's roll with it at the moment and pick your battles accordingly. Sometimes it was about just getting stuck in and swimming as hard as you can and taking the brickbats that come with that. So how did I do it? Well, I think I didn't always do it well. I think sometimes I made big mistakes, but there's learning in that. Being reflective and looking back, I think it was about building alliance with people who have got both power and influence. It's that whole power-influence dynamic. Because how to get significant people interested in what you're trying to achieve and getting them aligned at an emotional level. So they could share your passion. So I think I've always been effective in causing change. And sometimes I've done it almost as an organisational terrorist. I've been the troublemaker. And, I freely admit that. Because it's about doing something spontaneous which would make people stand up and listen to you. But over the years, I think I've developed sort of more of a process of change management. And, my greatest satisfaction is when people bring me in before change is about to happen.
Okay.
But I never get that commission. I never get that piece of consultancy. I get called in where there's been some significant change in organisations or there's a problem. And in solving the problem, there has to be some form of change, or they've tried to move the change forward, but I've got a backlash. Then my phone goes, and I go into an environment which is often I've referred to as a panic environment. You've got managers who are used to not having change, environments where things have been the same for many years. Something suddenly has happened to change that environment, change the landscape for them. And because there isn't an element of leadership in there, they're all managers, they're no leaders, they panic. So I can never really go in and change the frequency or the activity of change. What I have to do is try and increase the leadership dynamic. Okay. So that's more or less, I suppose from learning, it's about understanding the importance of leadership within a change environment. That's what I've learned since then. Okay,
and so how do you do that? How do you change that leadership dynamic?
A lot of it is to get people and train them on leadership technique and really teach the skills of leadership. But obviously, leadership is important at every level in an organisation. So I normally start at the top. I normally start at the board, at CEO level, at director level, at chief level, to try and get them to see the world as I would see it, right. To get them to buy in to the concepts that I'm trying to promote. And once I've done that, and that's not putting them on a course, that's doing one-to-one executive coaching normally. Yeah. And doing that leadership mentoring element to get them to see things with a different pair of eyes, to empathise, to understand, to feel the change that's needed.
And how did you do that? Because assuming this organisation, they've called you in because there is a problem. Yeah. From what I'm hearing and what you're saying, some of the problem at least probably lies at that top level. How do you get them to see it with a new set of eyes?
So for me, it starts at the top. Yeah. But then it cascades through the organisation. I don't say down the organisation because I think in hierarchies particularly, you have to turn the hierarchy on its head in many respects to get the changes that you desire. But really right down to frontline service providers. It's a top to bottom or bottom to top approach in terms of developing leadership skills, a leadership mindset, really. That's probably the basis of how I go about my consultancy approach.
Okay, and so if you're turning the hierarchy on its head, that interests me. How do you do that? How do you get? Because you can get that leadership mindset, but you also have to have permission effectively for people to lead within organisation. Otherwise it can lead to frustration. How do you avoid that, or what are those dynamics that you create that enable that change to happen?
Well, I think it's about being able to paint a picture with your words as to what the future might look like, and to ask questions, simple questions about, especially to people who are in senior positions, like what does the future look like for you? What are your hopes? What are your dreams? What are your expectations? What are your fears? And to get them talking to me. That's the most important thing I find, is to get people to trust me enough to open and become almost vulnerable in terms of that mentoring approach. So once I've got people trusting in a trusting environment, then I can through asking simple questions, get them to come to a realization of what the solutions might look like. It's not about me imposing my solutions on any organization. I try and grow solutions in a bespoke fashion within the organization, using the leaders as the raw material of that, because they know their organization better than I will ever know it. But it's to get them to open up and have that visual, to see, to feel, to smell what success might look like. That's really important.
Okay. Is that what you mean by getting people aligned at an emotional level?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's about, a lot of change is all about the sort of superficial levels of neurological thinking, with changing the environment, changing the behaviors, changing the skill sets, putting people on courses to learn new ways of doing things. And to be honest with you, that has no impact on the leadership dynamic. Yeah. For me, I have to get down to the deeper neurological levels of values, of beliefs, and indeed to identity level.
Yes.
So what do people see themselves? Where do they see themselves in the organization? How do they, consider what labels do they put on themselves? And can they see themselves as an integral part of that organization, or have they just got a job?
Yeah.
Is it just a position that they've been promoted into? And I find that I can do that quite well. There's a lot of things I can't do. I can't repair your car if you have a problem. I can't sort your plumbing out in your home, and I can't rewire your house. But I can normally do executive mentoring quite well and deal with people on these issues and be convincing and create environments in which learning can take place.
Yeah. And if I can take you back to the police then, because I forget how many people you had working for you when you were ACC, but
a lot.
It was a lot, wasn't it? With like 4 numbers strung together, yes, or something like that. Can you think back, how did you create change? Because you seem to have a very loyal following amongst the people who reported to you. Other senior officers perhaps found you a bit more troublesome, but
not all.
I'm trying to build that up, like it's some dynamic or something.
I could tell you some stories, yes, for sure.
That's a completely different podcast. There's probably too many beeps in it as well. But if you think back to that time, you had 1,000, say, people working for you. How did you align groups that size or big organizational units around a change when you can't necessarily have that one-on-one impact on everybody?
It's about sort of like making your organization future-proof, not trying to predict what's going to happen, but facilitate an environment which was equipped to handle the uncertainty of the future.
Okay. So if you were a senior leader, not necessarily in the police, but you're in an organization now, how would you be implementing that proactive thought, about where change is going to be needed, what's going to be happening, how we can get out ahead of it, if you like?
Well, I think the biggest issue for many leaders that I work with is the prevailing culture in which they're operating.
Okay.
And the kind of organisation that they've been promoted or advanced in to the positions of leadership, of positions of power. And if it's a hierarchy, it's sometimes challenging for somebody to be protected in a stable hierarchy where they're in charge, what they say goes. Perhaps minimal amounts of consultation and engagement, not a lot of creativity going on. Not a lot of feedback. It's difficult to step out of that and suddenly then go and ask people what could be improved without taking it personally. So a lot of this is about dealing with the individual. First of all, a leader in those positions need to address who they are and how, what needs to change about them. It starts with self.
Yes.
Before a leader can actually engage with anybody else on an agenda of change, I believe they have to really be honest and make themselves a little vulnerable, even if it's to themselves, about what the impact of change is going to be, and if they're prepared to have the courage to take that forward. So it's always about self first.
Okay. That sounds really interesting, and that does feel like a really important part of leadership, and certainly one that I share. What else creates a great leader, or a great change leader, a leader capable of taking an organisation through change?
Well, I think you've just mentioned the word capability. I think, to be an effective change agent, you have to be capable, you have to be competent in the environment that you're working. Yeah. And that's not always so with many leaders. Many people get a position because of family or maybe a connection, or lots of people get leadership positions because of the title rather than of the role and their ability. So I think there's something about competency in the environment that you're working. I think there's something about understanding and being self-aware, which I've already mentioned, but it's about having that emotional intelligence to be able to relate to other people in the environment you're working. Now, I'm not just talking about your colleagues. I'm not talking about the staff that work to you. I'm thinking about the person that you're reporting to, your boss, but also the customers, the community that you're there to serve and provide the services to. And emotional intelligence keeps coming up time and time again, particularly sociability, particularly empathy, particularly problem solving, motivation. All of the elements of emotional intelligence for me are critical in any senior leadership role. And to be honest with you, it's the one that normally is lacking in many organizations. I mean, I don't mean that in a horrible way. It's just that, people aren't always promoted. Emotions, for example, empathy. I've heard people, I was told as a boy, you don't get too emotional, you'll never get on.
Yeah.
Boys don't cry. Don't get too empathetic. Don't feel like that. I work with many senior women who, throughout their career, have been told, don't show any emotions. That's a barrier to your advancement, and you don't promote women because they're too emotional. For goodness sakes, there's a complete taboo on emotions in the senior leadership these days. And the most effective leaders are the ones that actually can deal with emotions, yes, both in themselves and the emotions of others. And because that's the underpinning element to any motivation and anything connected with delivering performance. If you've got passion, if you're driven, if you've got emotion in the environment you're working, people are going to buy from you. People are going to follow you. And people don't even need to like you. If they believe that you have the passion and the belief in what you're doing, Brindle says that you don't even need to like your leader. But if you believe that they believe in what they're doing, you'll follow them. So it's not a beauty contest. It's not a popularity contest. It's about having the passion and the drive and the authenticity to really feel what you're doing, to be part of that movement. People will follow that.
Yeah.
As long as you communicate it, as long as you empathize with people, as long as you explain to people with honesty that actually, do you know what, this journey is going to be painful. This is going to be difficult. It's not going to be easy. And there might be some casualties. People really do embrace that honesty and they'll follow you.
Okay.
And sometimes there is collateral damage, but people are prepared to accept. It's like taking a child for an injection, You take a child to a doctor's. Mummy, Daddy, is it going to hurt? No, darling, but, it's going to be fine. If it just hurts one little bit, a child will scream at you and never trust you again till they're 16. But if you tell a child, it's going to really hurt, but I need you to be brave. Injection done. Where's my sweet? Job done. It wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be, and people are just the same.
Yeah.
Be honest with them. But it takes some courage to do that.
I think that's really interesting, actually. And in the area of change, it does occur to me that most of the time people try to manage the processes and the systems and not the people, and certainly not the emotions, not recognizing that for whatever reason this is going to bring up some emotions. Let's map those emotions first of all, and let's look at them in ourselves as well. Definitely. In order to know whether we can
and be honest with self, be honest with others. It's not a sign of weakness, honesty. The truth will defend itself in any organization. So front it up. If we look at the significant change models, Kubler-Ross, Tuckman. In most organizations, even before change is occurring, people will have suspicions about change. And unless you are prepared to give them the information up front, they will make it up. They will make it up.
Yeah.
And they will make, emotions will rise, and they will make it up, and it will always, in their mind, and the rumours will always be far worse than the reality.
Yes.
So it's about popping that bubble in many respects and giving people as much information as you know. And if you don't know, say you don't know. Don't lie, don't make it up. But I think that helps. Secondly is people always go through a process of denial. We can deny and deny and deny. Sometimes that's where the honest conversation takes place. When I was in the police, right in my early days, I had a job. It was the worst job I ever did. And it was basically giving people, I was like the death message officer. Okay. So basically, whenever there was a sudden death or an accident, my job was to go and tell the family that somebody had died. Now, when a uniformed police officer knocks on your door in the early hours of the morning, it's never going to be good, right? It's never going to be good. And people used to open the door, and before I even said anything, they were making suppositions. Who's died? Who's hurt? Is there a problem? Where's my husband? Where's my son? Where's my daughter? And you had to, take people inside, get them settled before you actually told them. They'd come to all the conclusions.
Yes.
Even before I'd open my mouth.
Yeah.
And half the time it was far worse than the reality, which was bad enough. Once you told them, people went through that anger, that frustration. And sometimes it was actually directed at me.
Yeah.
As the officer telling them the bad news. And organizations are just the same. People get upset, people get frustrated. And they will get into a depressive state at some stage. That happens with change before you come out and come out of that curve. But the good news is this. First of all, we know through evidence and research that people come out of those change curves, those change depressions at a higher level than they went in.
Right.
So it's true, change actually is good for you. What doesn't kill you genuinely does you good, unless it kills you, in which case it doesn't. But secondly... Then
you don't notice.
But the dip of depression, the dip of frustration, and the transition into an enlightened place can be reduced if people have active communication, coaching and mentoring support, and authentic leadership. Yeah. And so we can go through the change. We can't deny the fact that change will have pain, but we can reduce that pain by being proactive and doing things as leaders, which are tried and tested techniques. People go on MBA courses and they learn all this, but why they don't apply it in their environments, it constantly frustrates and astounds me. This stuff works. It's not just theory.
Yeah, I think. Well, I know you're right. That's why I do what you do,
and I think that's really important.
Yeah.
And mindfulness has suddenly become a big thing. Well, it's no big thing. It's been around for thousands of years. The concept of living for today. And doing the best today that you possibly can. And I think sometimes we've lost the plot a little bit.
Yeah.
Because I see things happening now nationally, internationally. Old thinking, too much trying to predict the future, and not enough time spending on the here and now. And I think in any change environment, any leader has to be able to be mindful of the future and learn from the past, but to deal with the here and now.
Yes.
And that takes a little bit of mentoring sometimes to get people to focus on...
Bring the brain back to...
Let's get it. Yeah, what are you going to do today? How about today? How about this morning? How about the next hour? How about the next conversation? Let's just get focused on what's happening here and now. Now, if we do that, I truly believe that the future will look after itself.
Right.
And because change is going to happen whether you like it or not. And in many respects, I sometimes I use the metaphor of electricity. If you get electricity, the flowing electricity will, if you put it through a light bulb, give you a light. All right, it's beautiful. You switch the light bulb on, you get light because it's flowing. The electricity is flowing. So the electricity being the communication, the engagement, the dialogue. The minute you stop any of that and you put a block in any electrical circuit, sooner or later you're going to get a spark. Now that spark, those sparks that's my that's my day job. I deal with organizations that are sparking because there's no communication, there's no engagement, people have stopped talking, there's too much suspicion, too much rumor. So the sparks, there's a lot of heat but no light. So you have to get people talking again. And certainly if you're talking about politics, big P politics or small P politics, the minute you stop engaging, the minute you stop listening, the minute you stop communicating, I think that's when the problems start. Genuinely.
Cool. Well, I hear what you're saying about being in the now, and I think that is really important and working with those sparks. Going back a little bit to what you were talking about before, when I was hearing about the leader and their need for a vision and to take people on that journey, I hear everything you say about you and I can't predict the future, and therefore I'm going to ask you to predict the future because, hey, I'm a rebel. But if you look at the marketplace right now, look at the world right now, I know we can't predict what's going to happen, but there are some trends that I'm sure you're observing or watching. Are there particular businesses, sectors, occupations that you think are going to be obsolete or have to change massively? And perhaps similarly in the Middle East, I'm very interested in that perspective of what changes do you see happening over there?
Wow. Okay, well, if I think of the industries that I work in now, and it's a cross-section, everything from the financial sector to health to education, I think there are some really exciting times ahead. I mean, really exciting times ahead. We are seeing more creativity and innovation than we've ever seen. The young are coming out of schools and universities not prepared to accept the status quo and wanting to really make a difference. They don't look at one career now. It's like a series of different careers through, that's how they see their world, which was different to how I saw it. I was told, get a job with a pension and stick it. Even if you hated it, you stick it. But young people don't see that anymore. It's different. But I think we need to push that even further. So I predict that it's going to be more innovative and creative for the future. But I think we're not doing our young people a particularly good service in the education systems globally in terms of encouraging young people to think differently, to think out of the box. It's still about tests, passing exams, and learning things by rote. I don't think that's a terribly helpful way. And I deal with a lot of graduates and young people coming out of universities that actually aren't fit for work. So a lot of my programs is focused on equipping these people to be able to handle today's environment because their education system has failed them in many respects. And I'm doing a lot of work with teachers at the moment and with schools to try and create more innovative and creative thinking, and particularly a more inclusive environment where people with challenges such as dyslexia or other ways that people have difficulty learning aren't sort of identified and stigmatized, but included in our thinking. So I think in terms of the future, it's exciting, but I think there's a lot to do in terms of the way we are educating our young people to equip them for the future. Still a lot of old thinking going on in the education systems. So I certainly think that technological advancements are going to be at the forefront, and that permeates every industry that I'm working in, from oil and gas through to financial to banking through to health, and it's incredible the advances there. But there is clearly for me a disconnect with the human side, and some people call it soft skills, but the ability to actually to engage with customers, engage with communities. I think there are gaps, and I think that's really dangerous. I think it's dangerous from an economic point of view, but also from a social point of view, that the gaps are increasing. So the rich appear to be getting richer and the poor appear to be getting poorer, and that is not a recipe for health, prosperity and security. So I think there needs to be some form of levelling off here for the future, whatever that might look like. I'm not saying I've got the answers, but I do worry about the gaps. The gaps are getting greater. The big thing that I worry about is the growth of arms. The growth of the arming of countries, and for me as a pacifist, it really, I have an issue with that, and I just I'm saddened with the amount of money that is invested in arming countries, arming people generally across the board. Whilst if you had a child in front of you that needed a meal and another person there that you could spend buying a gun, why would anybody why would anybody buy the gun when the child is hungry? And, I do a lot of work in India, in the Far East, in Africa, and these gaps, it's painful to see. And you think we could do better as humanity in terms of the things we should be changing.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not going to change that as one person. I'm not. But, I have a bubble of people around me. I have people I work with in senior positions. I have friends. I have family. I have colleagues. They know where I'm coming from.
Yeah.
And I try and do what influence I can in terms of helping to direct the change in the future. But, who am I to say what the future should look like? I'm seeing it from my map of the world, from my bubble. And everybody has the right to try and influence the future. But can we do that with tolerance and respect so we can all at least live together and survive together in a peaceful environment built on trust, love and respect? Now, for me, that's more important than knowing where the next mobile phone's going to come from and what it's going to look like.
Well, we definitely agree with you on that, and that's part of our frustration as well. Can I take you back to the arming of countries and that sort of thing, and the stuff you put in after that, and the choices that need to be made between buying that gun and feeding that child? Is there a way of what learnings can we take from that? Because at that level, it's just a frustration because we feel powerless to actually change it. We can only be bystanders on that. If we take that into an area that we maybe do have an influence, an organization or our own lives, are there lessons that can be taken from that, or choices that can be made from that can empower us? In other words, how do we get out in these big frustrating issues that we have today with a sense of being at course and some level of power?
I think there is always that danger that you feel that it's just too big. What can I do? But actually, that's self-limiting. So what I do with a lot of the organizations that I work with, and I do this with my own organization, I take the values in terms of the way we do a business. And I mean, a lot of people call this CSR, but for me, it's about the giving part of organizations. So what can we do outside the economic demands of fulfilling our targets and profitability in an organization, but at the same time, take those values into the community and give back? Now, I'm not just saying give money back, because I think that's the easy bit.
Yeah.
For me, giving back is actually, whilst I'm doing so much mentoring with senior managers who are paying for it, I'll mentor some unemployed people or some homeless people or people with little opportunity. I'll give my time. That's the most precious thing I can give.
Yeah.
I can't buy any extra time. What I don't use, I'm going to lose. I can't bank it, and I can't replace it if I haven't got enough. So for me, giving time to those endeavours and a giving agenda, a CSR agenda is so important, and every organisation has the capacity to do that. But that's my hope, and that's where I'm trying to change. But you know what? Change is difficult, right? Because my diary's full, and to try and engineer that time to do that. I often say to people, you think change is easy, right? And you're in a big change program in your organisation. I tell people to fold their arms. Fold your arms. Do it now, right? Easy. Fold them the other way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You've done that to me before.
You get my point?
Yeah.
And then, but we do things automatically, and we are rewarded, automatically to do that. Through that homeostasis that keeps us doing predictable things, the hormonal response that we get by doing things predictably is difficult to overcome. If you can't fold your arms a different way without feeling some disquiet, some confliction, how are you going to change your organization? How are you going to change the world? How are you going to change anything?
I'll work on it. I'll work on my arms, I promise.
But that's the point.
Exactly.
We are psychologically and hormonal, and everything is predicated about consistency. That hunter-gatherer psychology is our burden, and we have to overcome that. So keep practicing the arms, please.
I like that. I like the balance in what you're saying around bringing consciousness to that giving agenda, but also a freedom to it, because sometimes people can get so trapped in, am I doing the right thing? I was listening to, I think it was Prince Harry the other day, talking about being taken out litter picking with Charles, and how he thought, surely everyone does this, because that's what they were used to doing. But some things are so easy to do and so easy not to do them as well. And I'm hearing in what you're saying, that wonderful energy of just do it.
Yeah.
I'm also seeing, I'm interested in, I think in a question, a sort of last-ish question really, about resilience to change and how people develop resilience to change. And I'm hearing in that CSR agenda, that giving thing, the way you started that was starting off from these big arms, I can't help on that, but I can make a difference to this. I'm hearing a sense of agency there, and that probably will help resilience to change. Any other thoughts on how someone gets out ahead of change, knowing change is going to be happening anyway, and builds their resilience?
Whatever's happening in your life, the one thing you have influence on is you can change. You can change the tidiness of your desk. You can change the order in your garage. You can change the cleanliness of the inside of your car. You can change the pen that you write with. Do some form of change that makes you feel good, that makes you feel somehow empowered, and build on that change. Change should evoke more change. We should evoke more change, not in a chaotic way, but in a mindful and progressive and systemized process of change. And then change starts small, but it can go anywhere, any direction. And that, for me, is the exciting part about change management.
Fantastic. I was going to ask you another question, but that just seems the perfect place to finish this conversation.
Well, the quality of your questions are so enormous, I don't want any more questions. I don't want any more. Stop it right now.
Will do. David, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure as ever. I look forward to the adventures ahead, and good luck with everything.
Thank you. It's been good. I've enjoyed it.
Wonderful.
Bless you.
Now, clear off. Thank you for listening to this 91 Untold Change Project podcast. I'm Neil Armand. If you've enjoyed it, please subscribe. You can also keep in touch with our adventures on social or at 91untold.com. Thank you for listening, and we look forward to the adventures ahead.